Hey everybody, Luann here from EveryStem. I am with Erica Crawford. She is a farmer florist and her business is called Epsilon Floral and she's located in Linden, Michigan. And today we are going to talk a little bit about how Erica went from not using EveryStem to using EveryStem, how it's transformed her business and how it helps her, particularly as a farmer florist, to make sure that she is profitable with every event that she creates. So thanks for joining me, Erica.
Thank you, Luann, for having me here.
So let's get started with just tell us a little bit about your business and how you got started in the floral industry.
Sure. As you mentioned, my business is called Epsilon Floral, and I have had it kind of up and running for about 3 years now. Kind of started doing events during the year 2020, which was a wild year for all of us. But I kind of got involved just very organically, for lack of a better word, just as someone who was looking for a creative outlet and started just designing with flowers for fun and found that I was good at it and enjoyed it and people liked the things that I made, and sort of at the same time got started with growing just by kind of playing around in the backyard with sowing seeds and seeing what happened. And the sort of synergy of those two things is what led me to wanting to do something that was more than a hobby with it. And so my business kind of is more focused on weddings and events and not as big of a focus on growing, even though I do have a decent sized cutting garden in my backyard. But my goal, in addition to just putting out flowers into the world for mostly events, is to do things as sustainably as possible. So sourcing things locally when I can, whether it's what I grow or what some other growers in my community grow, and then incorporating that when I can into the events that I do. Obviously, I'm in Michigan, so our growing season is over at this time of the year.
Right.
Um, so yeah, that's kind of a quick story about the background of Epsilon.
That's great. And so when did you find EveryStem? And what were you doing to kind of plan or organize your events and your, growing your flowers kind of before that? Maybe we'll backtrack to that first, and then we can
Sure.
kind of talk about what you were looking for, what the issue was that you were trying to solve when you stumbled across EveryStem.
Right. So prior to using EveryStem, I would mainly plan out what I needed to order for events. And when I say order, whether it was from my wholesaler or from another grower in my area, or just plan to cut from my fields, I would mostly just rely on many spreadsheets. So I got into the habit of writing recipes ahead of time to make sure that I'm not over or under buying or over under planning for what I need for an event. So I was already kind of in the habit of doing that.
Mhm.
But I found that, it was a long, tedious process where, I would basically manually create a spreadsheet that had columns for prices and quantities and bunch sizes. And I would use that to calculate how much I wanted to order for something and how much extra it would leave me with. This was even more complicated if I had more than one event for a particular week, trying to share product between events and so forth.
Right.
So I learned about EveryStem, I believe, through one of the Facebook flower forums, Real Flower Business, where we're both members, and I learned from
Yes.
other business owners that were using it or testing it, and it intrigued me because all of the things I immediately learned about it told me that I was doing all of that, but I was doing it myself,
Right.
and there was a tool that would do it all for me, and also have the ability to save products from previous events and orders and not have to reinvent the wheel every time. So yeah, and I use it both for things I want to order from my wholesaler, but I also use it to plan things that events I might be doing using all of my own flowers. So it's a versatile tool in that way.
That's great. And so when you first started your business, did you go through some education? Did you kind of join, like I know you mentioned Allison Ellis's group, the Real Flower Business Group, which is such a supportive, helpful Facebook group. If any of you who are watching are interested in joining a group, that's a wonderful one to ask questions of lots of different florists and get lots of opinions and learn a lot there. So when you first started getting into it, did you feel like you needed to seek out some education and some learning, especially on kind of the business end of running?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I've worked with a lot of Allison's resources that she makes available, not
Mhm.
just through the community, but also through her own website. I knew very little about running a business. My husband is a business owner, so he was able to enlighten me on some things, but our businesses are completely different, contextually. So not much help with the flower stuff, but just thinking through, all the stuff I needed to learn and know and manage and monitor. So yeah, I absolutely sought out education, at the front end, and wanted to make sure that I was obviously going about it correctly, like not, breaking any laws, but making
Right.
sure that I was being as profitable and, sensible about it as possible. And I mean, customer service is a huge um, goal of mine to uphold. I take what I do really seriously as far as my interactions with my clients. I value them and their investment in time so much, and that's
Mhm.
one of the things I like about Allison's approach too, and some of the other gurus that I've learned from is learning just how to be outward facing in that way, and make my business an inviting place for others to to work with me.
Exactly. I think one of the most important things, especially as you're starting a newer business, because you're just a few years into this, is really establishing a great reputation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a key to that is finding that balance between satisfying your client, making them really happy, giving them the service they need and the product that you've kind of both agreed upon, especially for events, weddings, but then also to balance that with a healthy profit. So not to
Mm-hmm.
sacrifice your profits for the sake of making a client happy, which, we've all fallen into that trap a little bit here or there, but I think that's a big key. So do you find that that's something that you're constantly kind of making sure you're on par with
Yeah,
customer service is
absolutely.
important?
Absolutely. I mean, from the first, moment that I, pitch a proposal to a client, let's say for a wedding, I stand behind the pricing that I provide to them and
Mm-hmm.
make sure that what we've talked about that I'm going to create is going to match and align with that, both, from a investment standpoint, but also from an aesthetic and, visual standpoint. And that's one of the reasons that I love, we'll get into this, but I love working with EveryStems because it allows me to make sure that, the pricing that I am quoting and, relying upon for creating my designs is realistic. Um, I've in the past, obviously, said I could do something for a certain amount and then realized later that that's not realistic. And that just means I'm, probably going to lose some money on it. And that's not our goal as business owners.
Right.
And so I like a tool like this that allows me to make sure that what I'm promising is realistic, both for me and for them.
That's great. I think that's really important, especially for florists who are either getting into weddings for the first time or are just starting out their new business. Finding that balance on the front end is really important. So, if you wouldn't mind, we could walk through a little bit about the process. Do you use EveryStem when you're creating proposals for clients on the front end, just to price out, make sure your designs are going to be what you're promising, making sure you're kind of building a recipe that fits their aesthetic and their budget? Or do you tend to use it more on the back end when you're going to actually place the flower orders? It'd be great to kind of hear your process
Yeah.
with it.
So because I'm into my, full year of this, I don't feel that I need to rely on it so much for the proposal writing pricing side, unless I am proposing a design that I've never created for, especially if it's a large, installation. And I know you held a webinar recently that I attended, and I found that to be so helpful. So using it to kind of spec out what I would plan to put into a design and then allowing that to tell me how much I should charge for that piece. So I definitely use it in that way. In fact, I have some events saved in my EveryStem portal that are for next year for events that I've booked that I've already had, something kind of laid out, a template or, a couple of designs that I already priced out and used that to create the proposal.
Mm-hmm.
For some of my more standard designs that I do for, lots of events, obviously, bouquets and, kind of typical centerpieces like a round compote or a collection of bud vases and candles. I don't need to rely on it so much for the pricing stage.
Mm-hmm.
But I do have kind of generic event templates where I already have those designs in there so that when I open a new event to create an order, I don't have to go back to square one and say, oh yeah, what did I put in that last time? Or, how much did I charge per bud vase, etc. So I use it more on the ordering side versus the pricing side.
That's great. It's nice that you can kind of look back at some of the ones that you've already done and then create the templates, make copies. So there's a lot of features in EveryStem. If anybody's interested in getting a little bit more information about what Eric is talking about, kind of trying to create templates, copy events, and then actually price out designs on the front end for proposals, just reach out to me or jump on our website and we can kind of show you a little bit more about that in detail. Erica, do you use Canva or HoneyBook or other tools along with EveryStem to kind of run your proposals and keep track of your clients too?
I do actually. I use both the tools you mentioned
Okay.
throughout the process. So I use HoneyBook as my CRM, both for sharing proposals and housing contracts and handling payments. And then I rely on Canva for every couple or every event, I should say, that I book. I always create a custom mood board with color palettes and inspiration images, and that kind of travels along with the proposal as we're in the early stages of the booking process. And sometimes we refine it later on to kind of tweak the vision to make sure that it still aligns with what the client wants. But yeah, I do integrate all of those tools and platforms together with my business.
And how do you feel about kind of using multiple tools? Is it something that you feel really comfortable with now, kind of being able to kind of balance those? I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, how you put
Sure.
everything together.
I mean, again, I feel like what I'm doing now is easier than what I was doing before.
Mhm.
I'm always comfortable with using multiple tools. I'm kind of picky with the applications I use where I want them to meet my specific needs for what I want to do. So sometimes that means that I don't expect one program to do it all for me. I'd rather just kind of pick and choose the best assets of each one and then, kind of synergize them together to make sure that I'm able to do all the things I want to do in the best way and, be efficient, but also have like a beautiful presentation. And it's really important for me that what I share with my clients, I'm transparent about, what they are committing to. So that's what I like about HoneyBook is there's a lot of room for information to be shared back and forth.
Mhm.
Sometimes maybe, excessively. Sometimes I'm a bit too wordy, but it gives I don't have a character limit in there, so that's great.
Right.
But the ability to import images and I like that it sends automatic responses to clients when they have a payment coming up, or
Mhm.
like reminds them if I've sent something and I haven't heard back. So again, takes the weight off of me and adds some automaticity to it that definitely saves me time.
That's great. Yeah. I think the balance of finding the right tools is really important and also tools that are going to be affordable for you, for businesses. I think combining something like HoneyBook, Canva has a free option, but they also have a fairly affordable paid option. And then with EveryStem, I think that's a really nice combination of tools that you can use that kind of cover the whole gamut and are still fairly affordable for a small business owner.
Definitely.
That's great. So tell me a little bit about what you've been growing and how, growing flowers in your garden kind of complements what you're doing as a designer and how your clients kind of fit into that.
Sure. So again, I'm in Michigan, zone 6A. So our growing season begins in late April, early May, with tulips, and then we kind of wrap up at the end of the year with, dahlias and mums. But I do grow flowers for people in my community. So for example, I sell, weekly flower subscriptions throughout the year, which is one output of my garden, but I also structure what I grow around the events that I know I have coming up next year so that I can try to fill out some of the color palettes that I know I'll be working with now. I'm still in kind of some of the early stages of booking events. My event calendar is not full, but I've already slated what I'm going to grow for next year, kind of based on the weddings that I have coming up and wanting to make sure that I have colors and textures and specific blooms that I know are going to work well with the vibes for these events. So yeah.
That's great. And do you use EveryStem at all in your subscription side of the business in the bouquet?
I don't, because typically I kind of go off the cuff when I'm planning it week by week. I'll go out there and just kind of see what looks good and put colors together in my brain. But I usually have like a target, stem limit for how many I put into
Put in
my
each one.
subscription
That's good to
phase.
kind of stay within
Right.
your budget on that too. That's
Exactly.
kind of
And
one
make
of
it
those things you could go
consistent.
over.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great. Yeah.
Definitely.
I know a lot of farmer florists will do a subscription side and then they'll also do events.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the event side, tell me a little bit about what EveryStem has been able to empower you to do with growing flowers and kind of servicing your customers with the flowers you're growing and then things you're buying from other growers or the wholesalers.
Sure. So when I go to create recipes for an event that I'm going to order flowers for, plan ahead for flowers for, it's usually about a month before the event's going to take place, which is when, if I'm ordering things from my wholesaler, I need to get it in by that time to kind of guarantee that I'll be able to get the products I want. If I'm putting in a week ahead of time, it's less likely I'll get what I want from them. But if on the local side, whether it's coming from the flowers that I grow or coming from another local grower or a cooperative of growers, I usually am able to plan on those maybe a week before. So the timing there is important because what I'll do is, let's say I'm creating recipes for an event and I go, oh, what would be beautiful to use is, this snapdragon or this cosmos or, these rudbeckia that I have growing, or I think my asters are going to be blooming a month from now. So what I'll do is I'll kind of leave places in my recipes for local flowers, whether it's mine or it's coming from somebody else, to not order that from wholesale and make sure that I can get it locally. Now, sometimes things don't go as planned because we're relying on Mother Nature, and I'll have to fill it another way, whether it's something I'm going to grow and then I buy it from somebody else. But the point is that I had kind of bookmarked something that I plan to use, but I always put in what I expect to pay for it if I'm going to purchase it from somebody else, even if I ultimately cut it out of my fields, because either way, I want to make sure that my recipes are filled to value, meaning what I've promised to the client, but I'm also not over budget in what I plan to spend on product. So I love that I can kind of keep it generic too. I might not even put in the name of the flower, or I'll put in a few names like maybe it's a cosmos, maybe it's a dahlia, maybe it's an aster. I'll put in some hypothetical names and then later on figure out what exactly it's going to be. So
Right. And then you have a little bit of flexibility there. So I know we have a few other designers who will use, kind of like, yeah, you can put in the word local bloom, or you can put in MVP flower, or you can put in, any name that you want. That's one of the nice things I think about EveryStem is because it is a simpler program, it's very customizable. So I know a lot of florists will use it with, more generic names. We actually have another call coming up later in the month. This is, I think, November 28th. So it's going to be about kind of building some functional recipes that aren't necessarily the particular color or variety of flower. You can kind of put that placeholder in when you're building your wholesale order. And that way you can order from the wholesalers and then just have your local flowers. When you break that report out by vendor, is that helpful for you to kind of see, okay, this is what I'm ordering from my wholesaler, this is what I'm going to kind of fill in later?
Yeah, in fact, for the vendor, sometimes I'll just put local. I don't know who's coming from, and sometimes I'll just put me. So then I like that because then when I export my order, there's a list right there of what I have to be able to cut, from my fields. Or if I'm not able to cut it, I can change the vendor to somebody else that I'm going to hopefully buy it from. So yeah, I find that tool is so phenomenally helpful for actually like putting that order out there and requesting those products from whichever vendor it's coming from, or just giving myself a cut list. So
that's great. Yep. And do your wholesalers tend to are they pretty communicative about kind of letting you know what's going to be in? I know some people have wholesalers that, are very responsive and really, I think building a relationship with your wholesaler or your rep is super important. So for people who are just starting out and learning or getting into different aspects of this business, one of the biggest things you can do is go into your wholesaler or, set up a call with them and try to start to build that relationship. Do you feel like they're pretty good with giving you, the opportunity to substitute things or buy things if your garden isn't supplying what you need, to kind of go back in and order more?
Yeah, absolutely. I try to give them as much lead time as possible, and usually it's reciprocal. So, maybe I've ordered something and it's not going to be in for all the many reasons that we know
Right.
is,
Yep.
just, shortages on the farm, or there's issues with freight and logistics, or, we've encountered all kinds of hurdles in the last 2 years with
Yes.
sort of the, national and global flower market. So yeah, I've been very grateful for I work with a couple of wholesalers, and my reps in all of those locations have been really helpful, responsive, and flexible with like switching product out on site if I need to, and letting me know what pricing is going to be like that week, because that can fluctuate as well. And that's another thing I love about EveryStem is kind of storing a library of varieties and prices, but I can go in there easily and change that. It's like, oh, I know that, a month ago, this is what I paid for this flower, but this month it's a really hot item that everybody wants. And so it's going to be more. And so I can go in there and make those adjustments. And usually my wholesalers are helpful with that information when they know about it.
That's great. And so when you go through and kind of get to the, kind of finalizing your order, dealing with the wholesaler, your product comes in, or you're cutting flowers from your garden, kind of how do you use EveryStem through that process, of producing the actual event?
Sure. So I love the ability to export the recipes along with the event details notes that kind of print out at the bottom. I use that a lot for either, like, for example, let's say I'm doing a bud vase tablescape. I'll use that to kind of tell myself, you're going to make, 5 sets of 20 of these each, and this is what's going to go into each one. Because maybe in that column, I just have what's going to go all on one table. But at the bottom, I'll list, okay, one bud vase is going to have, a rose, a scabiosa, and a sprig of greenery or something at the bottom. So I love to be able to export the recipes. It makes it so much quicker for prepping my design space. Like if I'm going to do bouquets, I look at that total number. Let's say there's, 4 bridesmaids. I say, okay, I'm going to need, 20 of these roses, and just get them ready on the counter. I love having it for my design assistants too, who help me in the studio. It makes it streamlined for them, so they're not just staring at a whole wall of buckets. They know that they only have to work with what's on the sheet here for this particular design that we're creating that day. Throughout the event creation process, I like it for making sure I don't forget anything. So I know how much of each piece is coming with me to the event, so I can use it as another sort of checklist for loading up the vehicle, or making sure that the table numbers correlate with what we've planned on creating. So I find that it's a catch-all sometimes for either mistakes or something I might forget, or something that, is not aligned right. The numbers are off, and it's a good way to just make sure that, all my T's are crossed and I's are dotted.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's super important. I know a lot of times we'll get, as florists, we'll get these kind of last minute requests from our clients. We're adding a table, we're taking a table away, we're adding a bridesmaid, we're taking a boutonniere away, whatever it is. There's always a few adjustments close to the end, or a lot of times there are. And so being able to kind of look at that EveryStem recipe list and look at your HoneyBook invoice or your proposal in Canva and just make sure you have kind of all of that matching and that you're delivering everything you promised to the client is super important. I think that's
Absolutely.
great. Yeah. Trying to make sure that we're, delivering everything that we say we're going to deliver, because I know there's a lot of times where people are doing multiple weddings in a weekend, or we're all thinking about so many things. We're not just thinking about the wedding that's happening that day or that week. We're thinking about the next several months worth of things that are
Absolutely.
happening.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, we're
Um,
always ahead. I think it's interesting with florists because a lot of people feel like, oh, you're just doing, this one. And it's like, oh no, we're talking to clients, months in advance. We're dealing with changes for the next month and ordering flowers for that wedding. And then we're dealing with the weddings that we're actually producing that week. So it's great to have a place to a lot of people requested to add the notes and be able to put, links into, so that you can link your mood board or pictures.
mhm,
And I'm glad you're using that, because I think that's a cool feature that we added actually after we
mhm.
launched the product. So it's important for us to get feedback and create features for our members, and then to hear about how you're using it is great.
Yeah, I'll use that field a lot of times for supplies that I have to pull because I have a storage unit that's not in the same places where I design. And so
Yep.
usually, the day before, the day of, picking up all my product, I'll make a trip over there for the things that I need. And
Mm-hmm.
then there it is right at the bottom. I need to grab all of these things and these numbers. And then I'm not scrambling going, oh no, I'm out of bridesmaids vases, or I thought I had these candles here, but they're over there. I
Yep.
just like having it all in one place.
Yes, exactly. And gathering those items is a whole job in itself. When I had my
Mm-hmm.
flower shop, we used to try to be a week or two ahead of time. So being
Yes.
able to print out that supply list or that notes list and being able to go to the storage unit and maybe get a couple weeks worth of items, that way you're not having to make as many trips, or
Mm-hmm.
you're, making sure you get everything you need. You don't want to go to the storage unit and then go, oh, I wish I had gotten that, the batteries for the candles or whatever it is.
Right.
Exactly. And so I know you recently did a series of some Instagram reels about how you use EveryStem and how you're kind of going through the process of, kind of behind the scenes of your business. And I thought that was so great, because it was just like showing, not only your clients, but other florists. And I think I shared it on our stories too. So if you're interested, go to Epsilon Floral. Is your Instagram handle at
Yep.
Epsilon Floral?
Yep. Just at
Okay.
Epsilon Floral.
Perfect. You can go there and you can look at some of the recent reels, like look in the November, late October, early November timeframe, and see some of the reels that Erica's created for showing her clients and her audience how she goes through the process of, starting a wedding and working all the way through it. Because I think that some of that stuff that you show, if you show it in a positive light, you're not complaining that you have all this work to do, but you're showing your clients all of the value, all of the work that goes into creating an event. That also, like you were saying earlier about perceived value, it really helps show your audience and your potential clients why we need to charge what we need to charge, without saying, oh, I have, the reason we mark up our flowers 4X or 3X is
Mm-hmm.
because I have to go to the storage unit. I have to prepare all these recipes, and I have to, cut my flowers in the garden, especially for your event. All those things from behind the scenes, I think, are really valuable. So kudos to you on doing all that work to build that, that series, because it was awesome.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you for the shout out. I appreciate it. I know that when I was getting started, that kind of content was like gold to me to see what other designers are doing. And we don't all have to do it the same way for it to be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of from a variety of perspectives to put it out there and make it kind of interesting or entertaining or valuable, because it's the kind of thing that I definitely learned from others when they would share those things. And like you said, I really feel like the tone is meant to be positive, and I'm grateful for the work that I get to do and the clients that I get to serve, and I want them to feel like their time is their time and their investment is being valued on my end, but it is important to share how many hours go into an event before even a single stem has been designed, which is how it feels sometimes, like we're almost
Right.
at the end when we get to the designing step. So
Exactly. The
yeah,
designing is such a small fraction of the work that goes into, especially
totally.
event work. The
Mm-hmm.
planning and the process and the ordering of the flowers, sourcing things, and prepping is 95% of it, and then the design work is just the smallest piece. But
Oh,
uh,
completely. I was
yeah,
cleaning candles all day yesterday, so that was, you know, that was the last
exactly.
step, and that involved no flowers. Just
That's right. Yep. It's such a big piece of it. And the candles get us. We all are like anti-candle. We've all got our own strategies on how to deal with these candles that we have to provide.
right.
So tell me a little bit about if you have any things that you feel like are tangible results that you could share with others, your experience before EveryStem, kind of doing everything by hand, and then switching to a system that now automates a lot of these things for you and really helps you actually see the real numbers a little bit easier than a spreadsheet would. Um, have you seen a savings in time? Have you seen an increase in your profitability? Are there any things that you really feel like are the value that you're finding with EveryStem?
Absolutely. I mean, I would say the number one is just the time, and we can all agree that time is money. I've gotten as I've gotten to learn every stem, and there's learning curves, just like there is with any tool. I've gotten faster at it and kind of developed my own little tricks and shortcuts. But I've gotten to the point where when I'm ordering for an event that is pretty straightforward, mostly involving designs I've done before, I can get the recipes written and get the order out in under an hour. And that
That's
is a
great.
huge, huge improvement from before where I would, again, be starting from, inventing the wheel at step one and having to go back to old invoices and look at pricing for what I paid last time for that stem. Whereas now it's stored in the system and maybe there's still an adjustment, but I don't have to go look it up again. I bought that last week. I know what it was, or um, so that is a huge savings, the time. I made some notes to myself ahead of time about this question,
Okay.
but one of the other areas I feel like I'm really seeing a savings is in terms of just economy of product. A couple of weeks ago, I think I had fewer than 10 stems left at the end of an event. And that doesn't mean that I'm not giving the client the full value. It's just the way that we order stems. They come in bunches of 10 or 25 or 12, or they're sold by weight. So sometimes we don't end up using everything, but my goal is always that when I'm done and everything is filled to value, that for anything that I've ordered, I've got less than half a bunch left of it. I want it in one bucket if possible. And it's happened multiple times this year, this season, even outside of the growing season where, I don't necessarily have to cut in bunches of 10 or 25 because I'm cutting from my fields. But
Mhm.
I've really just minimized the excess, the extras, the leftovers. And I mean, that's a huge savings while still filling all of my designs to value and making them full and beautiful and using
Right.
high quality product. So
Yeah, that's
that,
definitely an increase in your profitability because if
mm-hmm,
you're having less waste, that means those dollars aren't being spent on those flowers and they're going into your pocket, which I think is really important because we all have some waste as florists. We can't
yeah,
predict the exact number, but like you said, really trying to minimize that and seeing that actually in a physical form where you're like, okay, I only have one bucket of flowers left,
right.
as opposed to, many buckets of flowers left. That makes a big difference for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I love that extras column on the summary sheet. It's been tremendously helpful with having multiple events. I've had several, double, a couple triple header weeks this year, and lots of times just to minimize that waste, I try to see what products are sort of crossovers between events. Like, okay, well, those spray roses are going to work in both palettes, so I'm going to make sure I look at my extras column because I'll still do a separate, event for, I'm not going to order them all in the same event, but
Right.
I'll go, oh, well, you know, in this event, I'm going to have 4 extras. And in this event, I'm going to have 7 extras. Well, there's a bunch right there. I can take that number down. You know, so do a little bit of that adjusting before I actually export and send the order out to my wholesaler.
Place the order. That's great.
Yeah.
I think that's such a cool thing, and something that we've learned from your experience and other members of EveryStem having that experience, where they really want to take, almost every florist has multiple events or multiple orders happening in a weekend or in a week, right? So we might have if we're a retail florist, we might have a funeral and a wedding and a weekly order. You know, as a farmer florist, you do mostly, you know, weddings and events, but you might have an event on a Friday and one on a Saturday. And so one of our newest features that is going to be coming out in just a few weeks, hopefully by the end of the year, definitely, is going to be a feature where you can take those multiple orders and EveryStem will do that work for you.
Oh, cool.
And it is going to consolidate those. So you're going to be able to, on the dashboard, just click the events and click export, and it's going to basically consolidate. And so if you have one event that's using, it's got to be the same flower, of course.
Yes.
You know, but if you're using those white Tibet roses in both, then if you need 20 stems for one and only 2 stems for the other, instead of ordering 50 stems, it's going to tell you just to order 25.
That's fantastic.
So, yeah, I'm excited about that because I think a lot of people really can benefit from that. And that's the kind of stuff that we really appreciate from our members, is the feedback of saying, like, you know, some of our florists, you know, members have bigger, you know, operations where they have, you know, 7 or 10 employees and they're doing, you know, multiple weddings in a weekend. So when you're doing more of a boutique, you know, studio like you have, where you're only doing, you know, a limited number, it's a little bit more manageable. But when you have to do that with 8 events, it's absolutely to add up. So we're really excited about launching that in the coming months. Probably by the end of 2022, it'll be ready. We're testing it now. So I'm excited about that. And then, is there anything else that you would want to tell other farmer florists or other designers about your experience with EveryStem, or any other things that you think are important to kind of share with people about how, you know, this tool has really enabled you to kind of save some time and be more profitable and really keep track of the history of your events?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I used it for this year that I didn't anticipate, but I found was very validating. Is I sort of had this question as I was designing one. I was like, oh, you know, I wonder how many bouquets I've made this year, or how many boutonnieres or whatever. And so I used EveryStem to go through and just tally them up. I mean, it was sort of manual because I had to go into each event and look it up, but way faster than how I used to do it. But it was really validating to go through and go, oh my goodness, like by the end of the year, you know, I will have made, you know, 250 bouquets or something like that. I can't remember the number. But I like it for just kind of reflecting. It doesn't have to be at the end of the year either, but just kind of reflecting on like progress and productivity, whatever those metrics may be. They don't necessarily have to be, you know, dollar amounts, although they could be. But I find that it's a versatile tool, not just for the planning, ordering, quoting, you know, et cetera, processes, but also just to kind of look at what we've put out there and you know, how much or how often, or, you know, whatever is valuable to us in our business. And it's right at the fingertips. You know, I have all that information saved in other places, but it's not as readily accessible as it is, you know, through EveryStem. So I that's one aspect of it that I sort of a surprise, you know, value point for it for me.
That's great. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. I'm so happy that you enjoy using EveryStem, and I know that you're just out there on Instagram and helping other florists learn. And I think that's such a nice thing. So if anybody has any questions, check Erica out at Epsilon Floral on Instagram. And if you have any questions about EveryStem, I'm at EveryStem with a little underscore after that on Instagram as well. And Erica, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for your time, Luann. Thanks for all that you do for the flower community.
Oh, thank you.